Quack, quack. The Houston Cougars are portal hunting, and one program up in Oregon seems to have a lot of potential Cougars.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, the daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for being Locked On Coogs, your first listen of the day. Appreciate you for listening each and every day here at Locked On Coogs. If you want to join the conversation and you don't know what to say, tell us which sock you put on first today, left, right. I assume you put on socks. It's a little bit chilly outside. Thank you for being Locked On Podcast over the One Sports Podcast Network in the world, making Locked On Cougs the most listened to Houston Cougars show out there. Today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Game Time. If you're trying to get into the game, the action, you got to travel to it, but the Texans are in the playoffs, any kind of concert, anything going on around the H, Game Time is supposed to be the best place to get tickets, so make sure you check them out today. But more on that fun later, because the Houston Cougars, I should say, are duck hunting. They're looking at some Oregon Ducks in the portal potentially. I want to break down what exactly is going on there in the first segment. Second segment, how this program is getting more physical up front, and a big addition of the weekend was a big part of that, frankly. And last but not least, are there any losses or misses that people are maybe upset about, especially one that just went to Lubbock? But first, there is a weird connection brewing between Oregon and Houston. Now, this started when the portal opened, and Houston almost immediately got Makhi Hughes. Makhi, remember, is a Tulane guy. That's the connection. He was at Tulane, played for Fritz, played for Nagel, had 2,700 yards over 2 years. It was a big-time pickup for Houston. He could have gone to a lot of Power 4 programs a year ago. He opted to go to Oregon to play with his brother. And ultimately, after realizing how many running backs there were there and how split up the carry was going to be, he opted to take the redshirt year instead of finishing the season out. He played not even 4 full games at Oregon last year, but is that kind of a talent as a high-end transfer portal running back coming to Houston from Oregon. And I should stress that opened up the immediate conversation on his brother. Naeem Offord was a high-end 2025 prospect out of high school. He was committed, strong commitment to Ohio State before flipping, I believe, on signing day is what I have down here, from Ohio State to Oregon to play for the Ducks, again, because there was a joint deal here he could play with his brother. And so I think a lot of people were like, okay, well, if we got Makhi Hughes, then clearly Naeem Offord is going to be in the portal and come to Houston too. Right now, Offord is not in the portal, and I'm sure that Hughes and Offord have talked. I mean, they're siblings, right? But I do think that it might not happen now. Offord is not from Houston. He's not from Louisiana. He's not necessarily tied in with the staff in the same way. Hughes has 2 years left, and so if there was some push to play together, you theoretically have the following season. Offord did flip his commitment from Ohio State to Oregon, so you wonder about how connected he is. Oregon defensive coordinator, I should stress, and then I'll play its way out a couple times here, is now the head coach at Cal. So a lot of players from the defensive side at Oregon are gone, and the offensive coordinator is now the head coach at Kentucky. So a lot of the offensive players are gone from Oregon. The whole roster seems to be turning over up there in Nike Town. But with Offord not presently in the portal, I wonder if that's almost more of a play for Hughes' senior season, right? If that could be some way to kind of, get the band back together one more time before who knows what happens after college. When you still have some control over it, that would be more wisely. I don't know. I mean, again, Hughes and Offord may talk, about this every day. I'm sure they talk a lot. They're siblings, but I do think that you'll see another push at that a year from now. Not that there's not something there now, but a year from now being more serious. The guys you should keep an eye on, though, are the trio of defensive linemen. Again, I mentioned that it's not uncommon for it to see an Oregon name in the transfer portal right now because their coordinators both left for head coaching jobs, right? But of all the defensive standouts that have left Oregon in the last 4 or 5 days, a trio, Ashton Porter, Tobi Haastrup, and Terrance Green, are all guys that have high school diplomas from the Houston area. What do I mean by that? Porter went to Cy Ranch, Terrance Green went to Cy Woods, and Tobi Haastrup is originally from London, but finished up high school at Maid Creek, right? And so those are three guys that have ties to the area already. Haastrup, I mentioned, is originally from London, did not play American football until his senior season. It was very quickly a very coveted 2025 kid, 6'3", 230, bunch of Power 4 offers again after 1 year of high school football. At 230 pounds, he went sub 11 in the 100-meter dash and sub 22 in the 200. The guy's got real speed. He played soccer in London, so he's got decent feet. He's a really good athlete that's just learning the game. Great project kind of guy, and you know what Fritz and company can do with development kind of projects here. Again, he went to high school in the Houston area, so I think that's a connection for sure. Certainly, Terrance Green is a more interior guy, 6'5", 330. Went to Cy Woods. He had a Houston offer in 2022. He graduated high school in 2023. He played 270 snaps at Oregon last year. Now, the staff obviously has changed over some since 2022. I did not see a Tulane offer on Terrance Green's list, but to be fair, most of his offers were in the Power 4. It was very hard to find the handful of like a couple here, like Prairie View and stuff like that in the local area, but not a whole lot of non-Power 4s on his list at high school. So maybe that had something to do with it, right? Tulane's like, hey, let's go get someone we can actually get. We'll see there what connection there may be. We'll see. The one that has the most connection is Ashton Porter, who may be the best immediate impact in the bunch as a defensive end edge guy. Again, an edge guy at 6'3", 290 pounds. He was originally recruited by Houston in the last staff and the current staff Houston's got when they were at Tulane. So relationship with the school, relationship with the staff from the city originally. Played 244 snaps last season, and this dude is large, a big time edge. If you're trying to replace Eddie Walls, which I think is a fair way to go about what they're trying to do with their next defensive line pickup, this guy is like if Eddie Walls ate a lot of cheeseburgers. He's a giant. Now, he's much leaner than the cheeseburger metaphor, but he's a really, really big guy. And I bring up this trio of defensive linemen name offer because I do think you're going to see the corner spot, the DB spot, or this defensive line spot is kind of the next two focal points. And all of these Oregon Ducks are on the market, weirdly with connections to the Houston Cougar program, whether it's where they're from or whatever. And look, I understand that they could be looking to follow their coach Tosh Lapoy to Cal. I understand how they'd be following, Stein to Kentucky or whatever. Maybe just seeing who's going to pay the next top dollar. They took all that Nike money to get to Oregon in the first place, right? But we also know that we've seen guys that once Houston can get in the ballpark financially, and it just takes the ballpark, people want to come play at home. It's happened for a number of players thus far. They want to play for familiar faces in Fritz and company and the staff. I also think for what it's worth that while Porter's probably the bigger need than Haastrup as a development project or Green as an interior guy, that they're all three guys that you would absolutely add to this roster. Same for Offord, although it's odd to talk. He's not quite in the portal or anything like that, right? A DB that is in the portal to keep an eye on is Ryan Nolan, Texas State kid. I also just saw Jacob Bradford threw his name in the portal. He's a safety, which isn't the bigger need. The corner probably is, but he was committed to Houston in June of 24 to the Fritz staff, but then flipped his commitment in October of 24 to LSU. He is now in the portal. Do not be surprised if there's some conversations there. He'd probably be another slot corner box safety, but we'll see if Jacob Bradford is. Ryan Nolan is a name, though, I keep hearing, so keep an eye on that, the guy from Texas State. Anyway, a lot of Ducks here, so to speak. I was about to say in a row. A lot of Oregon Ducks here in a way that could help out Houston. And it just seems odd that, like, there's just that many of these guys, the Houston connections, which speaks to how, Houston recruiting is very national, but also to how some of these guys maybe come home, have a good time, and then maybe they just stop ever leaving. And like the way that trickles is, I think, impactful. Speaking of impactful, Houston's got some big time physical ads in the transfer portal. And I'll talk about how Houston's adding to their physicality with the guys they've got signed in a second. But first, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Wayfair because New Year, it's here. Reset your routine, refresh your space. You're spending more time at home. You might as well love how it looks and how it feels. That's why you should turn to Wayfair. It's a one stop shop. Get your home back on track from bedding to mattresses, storage solutions for every room. Wayfair makes it easy to start the year fresh. Look, I've been in this house about a year and a half, and I have to tell you, they don't tell you when you get one of these things how you kind of start to find something new you need to refresh it every couple months. Wayfair is the best place to pick that thing up, whether it's new bedding, accents here, uh, perfect piece for that bathroom, perfect piece for that kitchen, whatever. Shopping is made easy, delivery is smooth, everything arrives exactly as expected. Get organized, refreshed, and back on track this new year for way less. At wayfair.com right now. Shop all things on this wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Part of Locked on Coogs here. Thank you for being Locked on Coogs, your first listen of the day. And being Locked on Sports Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network out there. And if you have not already heard, we have extras to offer you. The Locked On Podcast Network is offering an everyday and an all access tier of subscription to Locked On Cougs. If you want ad free audio, invite to the members only Discord, all access episodes, one on one texting with me, all kinds of merch or fun stuff to do with more Locked On Cougs. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/everyday to learn more about it, or if you just sign up right away, the lockedoncougs.supercast.com for more information. Again, I can't wait to talk to you on the subtext and Discord before the game, during the game, after the game about all kinds of things going on with the Houston Cougars and give you a little bit extra bonus content in there as well. All right, Houston had a couple pickups over the weekend, and I think it's notable to say that they definitely got more physical. The biggest name in a lot of ways over the weekend was Jaden Yates. And so if you don't know who Jaden Yates was or didn't know about him beforehand, he was a full-time starter at Marshall that entered the portal a year ago. And I believe Houston was actually recruiting him a year ago when he was coming out of Marshall as a potentially good fit to Austin Armstrong's defense. He's an interior box linebacker, physical guy, run in the box kind of guy, between the B gaps kind of guy, right? Not necessarily out in space coverage kind of guy. But Mississippi, yes, that Mississippi came calling. He took that option, right? Went there, started off the season as a starter, kind of got worked into the rotation. His skill set didn't necessarily fit the way that they needed to use him in Mississippi, quite like it would at Houston. Well, shortly after their playoff run ended and a loss to Miami in the semifinal, he threw his name in the transfer portal, do not contact tag. A few hours later, he's a Houston Cougar. And I think that shows some maybe I should have done this a year ago kind of decision making, but also I would point out that like when he was at Marshall, this guy was a Phil Steele All-American honorable mention candidate. He's all Sun Belt. He top 10 in tackles nationally. Like when he gets the reps and is doing the things he's more physically supposed to be doing, he's really, really good linebacker. I think he's a great fit for Houston. I went back and forth with Stephen Will as a host over at Locked On Ole Miss. Great show, by the way, if you want to do all things Mississippi. Steven's relentless. I talked to him some about it, and Steven was like, look, he just wasn't exactly the kind of athlete we needed. We needed someone who could cover in space and do this and do that. And he's more of a traditional, like between the tackles kind of linebacker. And we had a couple of those guys. We needed to do this other thing. And it just wasn't a good fit. He had great things to say about him, great things to, good accolades, impressive clips. And what's worth it wasn't like he didn't play. He played about 40 snaps in their semifinal game against Miami. Like he was a player for them. What's interesting too, and I don't mean to draw too many connections to Mississippi, but Stephen had similar things to say when Brandon Mack came over from Mississippi, and I was like, "Hey man, I hope he stays healthy while he's there." And that first year, that was not the case, but it's hard to argue that Brandon Mack wasn't a good addition after that, right? An impactful playmaker at that jack position last season. And so you see how, like, okay, they're bringing this in. The thing about Yates to me is that he signals a version of physicality on the defense. We can bring in that interior linebacker spot, right? He's a downhill tackle you have this face kind of guy. And that is similar to how you add Marion Thomas, the big 340-pound defensive tackle. Excuse me, I add Ejiro Eg Ejiro Egodogbari. Ejiro Egodogbari. I'm going to get that right. Another big over 300-pound type of defensive tackle. You bring back Khalil Afau, and you're adding to the defensive front with some physicality in a way that I think it's a little gnarly and nasty. We mentioned last segment there's some Oregon guys that can play that edge spot, but the question, I guess, has been how are you going to be gnarly and stuff at that edge spot? Well, I wonder if the real add is do you add an outside linebacker to play the jack spot, or do you kind of elevate a Chance Bryant and a Brandon Mack to play that jack spot, and then you swap LaTrevion McCutcheon down and put his hand in the dirt as more of a true defensive end. Now, if you ask anyone around the program, he is the freakiest athlete they've got. I asked several guys who's got the best get off, and defensive line guys like talk about who's the quickest, gets the ball, and without like to a man, they all say LaTrevion McCutcheon does. Think that could indicate a good edge kind of guy in LaTrevion. He's obviously got the athleticism for. We saw that on display a lot last year. But that's just the defensive side. On offense, Houston's also attempting to get much more physical and kind of guttery and really kind of get after you a little bit. They showed last year that they were going to take Connor Wegman and run him a lot, and they did. And they ran Dean Connors a lot, and they ran DJ Butler, and he got better. And DJ Butler got a lot better, of course, last year. Like it's impressive to see happen. This year, you return Butler, you return Wegman, you return Agnello, and you start building out this offensive line around it. Well, what you do there is you go out and you get a couple of guys, namely 3 guys that were all conference selections and better at run blocking than pass blocking for the most part along the way. Shandre Hurst, 2-time American Athletic All-Conference and a PFF All-American. You got Terrill All-Mac, Anthony Boswell All-Mac, and freshman All-American. That is a lot of beef. And what you're doing there is you're loading up to build this run game more and more and more. Now, look, they got speed at wideout. They're going to use the wideouts. Then year 2 of Wegman and Nagel is going to be great on that. But you're going to set all of that up, and you're going to also seal the deal in those games with being this level of physical up front. And I think the focus on that is, frankly, very pointed. You saw last year, and some of their losses, both against West Virginia trying to stop the run and an inexplicable loss, or TCU, you couldn't quite punch things in or couldn't quite get the first down in a couple of those short yardage situations, or against Texas Tech, where, look, they just were very heavily invested in the upfront guys. You saw that Houston needed to kind of devote more to that. This is a sign of devoting more to that level of physicality. And look, and we'll talk more in the final segment about losses, misses, or what I think about all that, because I really am continue to be impressed by the names and the resumes of guys Houston's bringing in here. I mean, this has got Jaden Yates, we just mentioned, was a real defensive player, like played real meaningful snaps in a college football playoff semifinal, and was a do not contact, I'm going to Houston within hours of that game concluding. I think that's a good sign. I think that's a sign of things moving in the right direction. I'm forever the optimist. I can always already see people commenting down below. It pushed in, but I see you. I think that's a good sign of where this is heading, especially when you see, like, look, you look at your next year's schedule. Those 2 road trips are notably more difficult next year than they were this year when you have to go to Utah and to Lubbock. But Utah is losing their physicality, and it's head to Ann Arbor. A lot of that's leaving. Lubbock is Lubbock. You got to make that road trip, but you also need to play them at some point to win the conference. Anyway, I think that things are shaping up for another strong year, and maybe an even stronger year than last year's 10-win season, just based on the physical kind of football that physical kind of football players they're bringing in. I want to talk about why I'm not so concerned about the ones leaving in just one second. Before we get there, today's show is brought to you by everybody's over at Game Time, because, look, there's one college football playoff game left, and there's just nothing like the playoffs. Tailgates, packed stadiums, being right in the middle of the action. That's why Game Time takes the advantage back to fan and gives it back to fans. It's not worth the hassle of being frustrated with long queues and logins and so on. Take that advantage back with Game Time. Look, open the Game Time app, choose a game, choose a concert, choose a show, choose anything happening in around the H or wherever you are, and you can see what the seat view is going to look like from right there. The zone deals, what's going to be the best seat and best deal in the house. And as first pitch, tip off, kickoff get closer, prices actually can go down. And it's a really cool app. Make sure you're monitoring as you're getting ready for the event to get in at the best price guaranteed. Take guess we're going to buy college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Again, it's code Locked On College, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Park Ranger Locked On Coogs here. And look, I want to stress I got two things wrong last week. I tell you when I'm right, I'm going to tell you when I'm wrong. I was very confident, and I said without saying that Houston was going to sign two guys last week, and they signed other places. Now, I try to let the kids announce first. That's generally my MO, but I very much hinted at Chris Barnes coming to Houston. And for what it's worth, there were real talk between Chris Barnes and Houston. Chris Barnes went to North Shore, then went to Washington State, transferred to Wake Forest, then opted out of Wake Forest, was in the portal. He's an electric speed guy, 5'7", but can make you miss in a phone booth. Really great return man. As things went on, it seemed like we're working back and forth trying to figure whatever's going to happen out. And then Houston signs Trent Walker. Now, look, Trent Walker is a really talented receiver. He's a veteran guy, played 4 years in Oregon State. Like, he's a much older football player. He's probably not as shifty as Chris Barnes, but he's 6'2". And at some point, if if we can continue to talk to this guy or just go ahead and sign this one, we're just going to go ahead and sign this one, right? And so they signed Chris Barnes. So they signed Trent Walker, and then Chris Barnes ended up signing with Oklahoma State, and they didn't sign the guy I thought they were going to sign. I'd also add that after that all happened, they also signed Tyson Turner, 6'2", 215-pound guy, originally from Bryan, was at Texas Tech. He comes much closer to home. He's got 3 years of eligibility left. And what it looked like to me was, while Chris Barnes undoubtedly would have helped them return game, and I should stress there is no ill will wish towards Chris. The kid's originally from Houston, go represent it well, and go, except for when you play Houston, have a great time in Oklahoma State, right? I would stress, though, that Houston's wide receiver room is big. Like, your slots are 6'2", your outside guys are 6'3". Like, this is a big receiver room all of a sudden. And for all of the things that Chris brought, you kind of got some of the same route concepts out of Trent or Tyson or whomever without having to use a smaller guy for it. And that's certainly an interesting play. Look, the other one I got wrong was Justin. Justin Cryer was a linebacker at Florida State. And this is Justin, that's brother of LJ Cryer, the basketball player that came through Houston. The Cryers are family from Katy. He had the transfer portal out of Florida State, and there were a lot of conversations with Houston and him too. And so much so that this is not just me chattering. There is so much conversation with Justin in Houston that you saw people crystal balling him to Houston. He came on a visit, something went well, etc. Ultimately, he opted to go to Texas down the road, and I think this part is totally me guessing. I'd imagine they threw a lot of money at it because they're throwing a lot of money around. So they landed a receiver for $3.5 million today. Like, that's part of what they're doing. And I don't know that Houston was going to go above a certain spot because they've had him a certain way. He's a good football player, a talented football player, but had some growing to do in terms of like his on-field development, stuff like that. So take that as a man. Again, there's no ill will towards the Cryer family for picking a different place. He's a Houston area kid, and frankly, the brother was, part of some of the best memories of a college sports fan I've got. Why would that's the way they go. I don't typically, unless there's like a real like action that spurns Houston, get upset with anybody for choosing something different. Everyone's got to do what's best for themselves. You got to do what's best for you because you never know. I mean, no one else will, right? But what's interesting is, and this may just be the fan base of getting used to where things are. I I feel like there's a lot of we need to do this, we need to do that, complain about transport. Like I have trouble thinking of a position in the transfer portal where Houston lost a transfer and got worse. Like, yes, Tanner Cozy will go to the NFL. Yeah, it's hard to replace that. He's a really good football player. Latrell McCutcheon going to the NFL, hard to replace that really good football player. But guys that went to the portal were, by and large, a lot of depth pieces. And what you brought in is a bunch of guys that will probably see the field, if not see the field a lot. That seems like you got better across the board to me. I don't. Again, like if I'm thinking through this, like David Ndukwe, I guess, did opt into the portal, and he was a starter in 2024 when you had a horrible offense, but he was a starter on the offensive line, and he started the first 3 games of this past season before like tearing his knee to shreds, right? And sounds like recovery is going as it should be for David, so that's great. He's applied for the medical red shirt, and he played 3 games. I imagine he'll get it, right? He threw his name in the portal, and I'm seeing places like Georgia Southern and stuff like that, and I think that speaks to who's going to take a chance on a tackle when you haven't seen him come back from this injury, right? I also point out he's from Georgia; it's closer to home, right? But you could talk me into that being a loss, I guess, because he was a good football player for Houston. I would say, like, but we don't know what he's going to look like post injury, and that may take more like 18 months to heal. Does he have 18 months left? Right? Those kinds of things. Similarly, Corey Platt. Corey Platt was a guy I was so excited about. They signed him from Tulane. He had the one Achilles injury. And it's like, okay, but like, we're going to gear him up where he's recovered, he's ready to go, and he's going to be a great Houston Cougar. And then he had another Achilles injury. And, it doesn't bother me that he followed his old defensive coordinator who went from Tulane to Houston at the same or with him to then go from Houston to Tech, even though it's a year later after he's shown he's healthy or whatever. Corey was a great story, a great locker room guy, and all kinds of things like that. But functionally last year, he was the 3rd interior linebacker in a defense where you played 2 of them. He played a lot, but like he wasn't a starter. And again, it doesn't mean he wouldn't have been a good player this year. I think as he gets healthier, he's going to be a really good player. But I don't think, as far as losing what his production was last year, he actually didn't get better by adding, as we mentioned in the first segment, Jaden Yates, right? Or something like that. Jen York, tight end, starting tight end in the 2024 group. Not a great offense, but he certainly had his highlights. And last year, he got passed up in the depth chart by McGarry and kind of straddled by Turtle Frederick. And you brought in Overmeyer. You got freshman Javion Martin. I think that we're okay there too. I say that to say that when I'm worried about losses and misses, while the misses that I had, I think there were really chances at Houston getting those guys, and that probably won't be the last ones that I missed. I feel pretty confident in saying that I don't know how many losses Houston's really worried about in the portal. I feel like they're getting better at every turn. And they were a 10-win team a year ago, getting better at every turn. And I think that suffice to say that I feel pretty confident about where things are going. Now, if you don't, you can tell me in the comments down below, or you can be an everydayer and we can talk about it in the subtext of Discord or other places as well. Got a Baylor preview out for you in just a second. West Virginia preview out for you in just a second. West Virginia game tonight. Now, I am coaching a game, again, Houston Moore teacher coach, at the exact same time as Houston, West Virginia. So the post game will not be live. I'm not comfortable doing a post game. I didn't see the game, but you will have something up in the morning, very fresh and new. So hit subscribe and the bell so you know when those things hit and go live. Locked on Cougars, primarily Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.